Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. In this video, I'm going to share my strategy and research for the running back position in Week 3 of the NFL. As I've mentioned in my previous videos, I primarily build lineups for the main slate on Draftkings. This cuts out the games Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night. I just like to have more of a variety to choose from. And so I concentrate my lineups for those contests. This is also where you'll find the Millie Maker, which is a $20 entry fee for your shot at $1,000,000. Now, there are thousands and thousands of entries, but I feel like I have just as good a chance as anyone else, and you do too if you do the research. Before I get started, I did want to mention that I use pro-football-reference.com as one of my sources, and I'll drop that link below. Now, when I get to building my lineups, before I look at any players, there's a few things that I do. The very first thing I do is look at the Las Vegas lines and totals. I'm looking for favorite teams, and I'm looking for games with high totals. The reason I'm looking for those is if they're going to be high scoring, they're going to have players involved in those games to do the scoring. This is just a starting point. That doesn't mean that I rule out all the other games, but I like to start with this. Next thing I do is I look at last week and try to figure out why I didn't win $1,000,000. And now that we have 2 weeks played, I'll be able to factor in those statistics as well, because each year is different. And now we're starting to build our own pool statistics for this season. So looking back at week 2, the top 5 projected running backs going into the main slate were Kamara, Elliott, Barkley, Gurley, and Cook. Now, the top 5 actual scoring running backs were Cook with 31.10, Aaron Jones with 28.10, Saquon Barkley with 25.50, Austin Eckler with 24.30, and Raheem Mostert with 24.10 from San Francisco. There were a couple that finished outside the top 5. Of course, Barkley and Cook were projected in the top 5 and finished in the top 5. Alvin Kamara actually finished number 35 overall, and I think with what happened to Breeze, I think that affected Kamara. I'm not sure how much of an effect it'll have on him moving forward. It'll have some as far as in season long and daily, but if I had Alvin Kamara in a season long league, I would not be leaving him on the bench. Because he'll still have a role in that offense. He may have even more of a role in this offense with Bridgewater filling in for Breeze. Elliott finished just outside the top 5. He was number 6 overall, and Gurley finished number 11. I feel that running back is the position in daily fantasy sports that it's the most consistent week to week. And one of the main indicators of this is when you look at how many touches that running back gets. And that's one of the key statistics that I look at when I begin sorting out the players that I'm interested in for my player pool. Running backs is touches. Now, before I dig into the week 3 statistics that I have and things that I have concerning touches, I do want to mention that in the Millionaire contest last week, the 2 running backs that were used were Elliott and Henry. Like I said, Elliott finished number 6 overall. Henry finished number 7. The week before, the guy used the strategy that I like to use, which is putting a running back in the flex position to give him 3 running backs. And the 3 that he used were Carson, McCaffrey, and Cooks. As I mentioned, a big piece of my strategy is to identify those running backs who are getting a lot of touches. Looking back at the top 5 in this category from week 2, we find that Cook had 23 touches, Jones had 27 touches, Barkley had 21 touches, Eckler had 23 touches, and Mostert had 16 touches. And I further break that down into how many points per touch after the games, and I looked at and I found Cook was getting 1.35 points per touch. Jones was getting 1.03 points per touch. Barkley's 1.21 points per touch. 1.06 points per touch for Eckler. and 1.51 points per touch for Mostert. So he didn't have as many touches as the other, but he was really efficient with the touches that he did get. Now, I do want to, I'm sure most of you know that touches are carries and receptions together. I just wanted to mention that. So those 5 running backs they averaged 22 touches. They averaged 26.6 points, which comes out to an average of 1.23 points per touch. Now, this is important as we move forward. I'll explain the formula that I use. I try to use 3 running backs every week if I can get up to them. I want the 2 running backs that you have to have, and I try to plug a running back into that flex position. As I said, I feel that running back is the most consistent position week in and week out. With the ideal that touches generate points, I like to project if I can get 70 touches out of those running backs. And if you use that formula from last week, 70 touches at 1.23 points per touch would give me 86 points altogether. Now, in the Millionaire Maker, in the first week, the guy who used 3 running backs, he scored 99 points between the 3 running backs he had. So using last week's numbers out of the top 5, coming up to 1.23 points per touch, I was right there, fairly close to what was used in the first week. So identifying and projecting running backs that have a high percentage of their offense, that equals touches, which in turn equals fantasy points. There are a few backs that no matter what the game script is, they're going to get the ball. They're going to get the ball thrown to them. Barkley, McCaffrey, Elliott. This year it looks like Eckler, Bell, and we knew with Le'Veon Bell when he was at Pittsburgh. Now he's with the Jets. We kind of knew that he was going to be the same type of player. Aaron Jones and Carson, they're all getting a lot of touches. Now, I dug a little deeper for this week, now that we have 2 weeks to look at. And these are the top running backs who have received the most touches through week 2. Le'Veon Bell, he's had 54, averaging 27 touches per game. Mack from Indianapolis has 47, 23 and a half touches per game. McCaffrey, 47, 23 and a half per game. And last week was really disappointing for McCaffrey. He was in the Thursday night game, but they didn't use him as much as they had used him in week 1. I definitely feel like his numbers will go up. Dalvin Cook seems to be very consistent for Minnesota, and if he can stay healthy, I can see him finishing in the top 5 overall this year. But he has 46 total touches in 2 weeks, averaging out to 23 a week. Jones from Green Bay has 41, which is 21 and a half touches per game. Eckler has 41, 21 and a half per game. Ezekiel Elliott has 39, 19 and a half per game. I feel like his number is going to go up too. Remember, first week they limited him because he didn't have any preseason work, but his touches are going to go up as well. Carson has 39 with 19 and a half per game. By the end of the year, now I didn't mention Saquon Barkley. He's not up there yet, but by the end of the year, I'm pretty sure that Barkley, McCaffrey, and Elliott will all be at the top in touches if they stay healthy. Now, the next thing I want to do, I've identified the running backs who are going to get the touches. Now I want to look at the individual matchups. You can do that by looking at the teams that they're going to face, the teams that are giving up a lot of rushing yards, a lot of rushing statistics. There were a couple that really stood out, and number one team against that's the worst against the rush right now is the Cincinnati Bengals. They're giving up 42.9 points per game to the running back position. Last week, San Francisco used 3 running backs against them. All 3 did extremely well. So Cincinnati's Achilles heel right now is the rush defense. Miami He's given up 34.2 points per game. Indianapolis, 33.4 points per game. The Packers, 30.9 points per game. Detroit, 29.6 points per game to the running back. And Dallas has given up 29.5 points per game to the running back. Those running backs that they're facing, I should have mentioned, Cincinnati's facing Gore this week. Miami's facing Elliott. Indianapolis is facing Devontae Freeman from Atlanta. The Packers are facing Lindsey. Detroit's facing Miles Sanders. And Dallas is facing Kenyon Drake or Balaj or whoever Miami can find to run the ball there. But that's another group of running backs that I'll put with the running backs that are getting a lot of touches. Now, the running back or the teams that are giving up the least amount of points per game to the running back position are Baltimore, who's only given up 9.6 points per game. I'm probably not going to use Williams from Kansas City this week. I think that game's going to have a lot of passing in it, and I'm not going to have Williams in my player pool. Tampa Bay's only given up 11.8 points per game. I think that's because a lot of teams throw against them. Game script can have a lot to do with that. And this week they're going up against Saquon Barkley, and Saquon Barkley is always in play week in and week out. It's just a matter of being able to have enough salary left to get up to him. Le'Veon Bell, he's facing New England, who's number 3, the third best team. They're only giving up 13.9 points per game. And I probably won't focus on Le'Veon Bell this week. The Jets are using their third quarterback. It's in New England, and this game could be a mess. They could be behind. They could be having to throw the ball. Bell does catch a lot of passes, but we don't know what we're getting with Falk from the Jets. And I don't like to use running backs. And one theory is, well, they're going to have to not put the game on the shoulders of Falk. They're going to have to rely on Le'Veon Bell. Well, the New England Patriots are known for taking away what you do best. That's what Belichick does. If they're going to focus on eliminating Le'Veon Bell, I don't know where their points are going to come from. The fourth best against the rush right now is Arizona. They're going against Christian McCaffrey. Here's another one that I'm not going to set to the side just because of this particular statistic. The offense in Carolina runs through McCaffrey now, not Newton. Newton has some nagging injuries. Matter of fact, they're not even sure if he's going to be playing this week. And you could see whoever replaces him dumping it off to him and utilizing McCaffrey. Now, McCaffrey actually last year had over 100 catches as a running back. So he's a play. I drafted him number 1 overall in my season league. Now, season is totally different from daily, but I drafted him. This was one of the years that I actually had the first pick overall, and I picked Christian McCaffrey, and because he does get a lot of touches and he is the offense. So there's not a situation where I'm not going to put McCaffrey in the game in season long, and it would take a lot for me to not even consider him in daily. And the fifth best team against the run right now, believe it or not, is Kansas City. And I think this is because of game script. They get teams down, and it's hard to play catch up when you're so far behind by running the ball. So teams may not be running the ball in Kansas City because they can't, they're behind. That happened last week to Josh Jacobs too in the Oakland game. And in my running back video that I did, I pointed that out. Jacobs had one of the highest ownerships in daily fantasy last weekend. People were using what's called recency bias, which is you see what happened last week, so you get stuck on that and think it's going to happen this week. Well, you got to factor in game script. And Jacobs, the game script where he did well in the Monday night game against Denver was totally different than what he faced in the Kansas City game. They weren't behind in the Denver game. They were able to lean on him. They didn't have to throw the ball as much. He only got one pass thrown to him in that game. But in Kansas City, when Kansas City put 28 points up against on them in the second quarter, kind of broke their spirit and took them out of the running game. He did get 95 yards, 51 of it was on one carry, and that's who he is. I mean, I don't not consider a running back because they break off one long one. I don't factor that in. But he the game script affected that, and that may be why Kansas City is ranked number 5. We're going to find out this weekend because I do believe that Baltimore will try to run the ball on them. I believe Lamar Jackson will have a good game on the ground. And so there you go. There's your top 5 against the run. Baltimore, Tampa, New England, Arizona, and Kansas City. Obviously, this has some contradictions that I pointed out, like McCaffrey. Arizona is ranked high against the run. That doesn't mean we won't put McCaffrey in the player pool. Same with Saquon Barkley against Tampa Bay. Those are guys that you automatically want to consider week in and week out. Now, some takeaways from that are if Kansas City and Baltimore are in the top 5 versus the running back, will they have to abandon the run? Since they're both in the top 5, are they going to have to abandon the run this week? Like I said, I do think that Lamar Jackson will get a lot of yards on the ground. He can take off on you at any time. And Kansas City is going to try to put the ball in the air against Baltimore. It'll be a very interesting game. It's the highlight game of the week. As I mentioned, the McCaffrey and Barkley contradiction. You're going to consider McCaffrey and Barkley every week. Now, out of all of them, Elliott seems to be the one that has the elite matchup. Now, I'm not just saying this because I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, because I will more times than not take Saquon Barkley over Ezekiel Elliott in daily fantasy sports if I can get up to him. But Miami's horrible against the run. Dallas is one of the top teams rushing. The game script definitely favors Ezekiel Elliott. The only thing that could be concerned is if they got too far ahead and they decide, well, we're going to start resting people and treat this like a preseason game. It's starting to look like the Miami Dolphins are a bye week for everybody, meaning just play a couple quarters and let everybody else play in the game. Now, Gore from Buffalo is another one that I'm interested in. I mentioned that Cincinnati is the worst at giving up points to the running back, 42.9 points per game. Gore doesn't catch a lot of passes out of the backfield, but you could see a situation where Buffalo tries to control the game with Gore, and he's been doing pretty good in the first 2 weeks. He's not in the top echelon of running backs, but if you spend up at some spots and you needed to get to a running back that's viable, Frank Gore can definitely be considered because of the defense of the Cincinnati Bengals is definitely being challenged in the run game. Freeman from Atlanta, Lindsey from Denver, Sanders from Philadelphia, and Drake from Miami, all on paper have good matchups. The thing to consider with these running backs is the game script. Is it going to allow them, or does it favor them to do well? For instance, you could see a situation in the Denver game against Green Bay. The Packers putting some points on the board, and Denver trying to keep pace. Flacco dumping it off to Lindsey. You could see that situation. You could also, believe it or not, see, I hate to say this, but Kenyon Drake from Miami, if they ever realize how talented this guy is, if they get behind, which I'm pretty sure they are going to get behind, they could dump the ball off to him. He's another one that's game script. He's not in the top echelon, but in this particular game, in what they call garbage time, which is when you're so far behind, three or four scores behind, and the other team basically lets you go out there and run your hurry up offense and go down and score once or twice when it doesn't matter because the game's so far out of reach. So those are running backs that you can consider as well. Now, as I begin to put together my player pool for running backs, these are the running backs that I am going to target. These are going to be in my player pool. McCaffrey versus Arizona. As I said, the offense runs through McCaffrey. If they have someone replace Newton this weekend, you can see a situation where he's going to dump the ball off to McCaffrey, get rid of the ball quick. A lot of the younger quarterbacks in that position, in their first start or um, what have you, not a regular player, you'll see them, dumping it off to the running back, dumping it off to the tight end, not taking too many shots downfield. Same as with Barkley against Tampa Bay. The Giants are starting Daniel Jones this weekend. First NFL start on the road. You can see a situation where he's going to dump the ball off to Barkley, use him in space, and probably a lot of short passes, which is what Barkley did with Eli. It's just kind of weird that they're making the switch to Jones so quickly. He didn't produce too well in the preseason. I don't really know what to expect from the guy. I didn't really follow him in college, and I was surprised when they picked him where they did. But they're the professionals and they know, so we're going to see. But if he's smart, they'll lean on Barkley, handing the ball, dump the ball off to Barkley. So McCaffrey and Barkley, obviously Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott is at the top of the list for me this week. The game script, the matchup, everything is in line for him to have a huge game. Mac from Indianapolis, he's in my player pool too. He's up there in the top 5 on touches, and playing against Atlanta, you can see a situation where Indianapolis wants to keep away from Atlanta, keep Matt Ryan and all those receivers on the bench. And one way of doing that is to run the ball, run out the clock. One thing I wanted to look at on the screen here, I did see something with Mac with a question mark. I'm not sure what that was. I noticed it earlier today. He did not practice today. It says Mac did make an appearance on the practice field Thursday, but he didn't have his helmet with him at the time and ultimately was deemed a non-participant. What Mac does Friday will therefore be critical with regard to his Week 3 availability. If he is limited or out Sunday against the Falcons, added touches would be available for Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines. So definitely keep a close watch on that if you're considering using Mac. Dalvin Cook is also going to be in the pool. He has been the focus of the Minnesota offense. Week 1 they won, week 2 they lost, and they were still using him quite a bit. And he's up there in touches. He's also been in the Millie Maker. He's been in the perfect lineup in the 2 weeks. So he's definitely in the player pool, and his price is a little bit lower than. Well, let's just look here. I want to make sure. Yeah, Barkley's 9,100, Elliott's 8,900, McCaffrey 8,700, Kamara 8,000, and Dalvin Cook's up to 7,800. He went up about $200 or $600 from last week. And another one is Austin Eckler, based on volume. He's getting the touches, he's getting the passes out of the backfield. He's getting the goal line work, so he's another one to consider. Houston's run defense is typically considered to be one of the tougher defenses, but you have to consider Eckler and his price. He's just under Dalvin Cook. Now, if I had to choose between Eckler against Houston or Cook against Oakland, I'm probably going to spend up to $600 and go on and get to Cook. Now remember, the running backs, that's the first 6 that I'm going to put in a player pool. Remember, the running backs I'm going to target are the ones that are getting the touches. And other running backs this week that I'm considering and going to target, number one, based on value, and he is getting the carries, is Frank Gore. Frank Gore is actually way down the list. He's at 4,400. He could be an extreme value, and value meaning you're definitely want to get 3 times the value, and 4 times is really great. So Frank Gore come in with over 16 points, which is definitely doable, especially if you mix in a touchdown. That's one thing I wanted to mention too. When I'm looking at statistics, I'm not factoring in touchdowns. When I used to do daily fantasy sports, I'd start looking at who did I think was going to score the touchdowns, and I didn't have much success at doing it that way at all because touchdowns are so volatile from week in and week out. Take, for example, last week, Aaron Jones got all the work for Green Bay. They got down to the 1 yard line, and who punched the ball in? Jamal Williams. So you can't rely on those as far as your scoring. So if you get them, it's just a bonus. So another running back that I'm considering for the player pool that I am putting in the player pool is Philip Lindsay. Green Bay's giving up 30.9 points per game to the running back. I'm going to use Lindsay. Flacco dropping the ball off to him. Perhaps they can get something going in the running game. Um, Another running back is Sanders from Philly. Detroit's giving up 29.6 fantasy points per game to the running back. And Philly has a bunch of receivers that are hurt, and you could see a situation where they try to go to the run game a little bit. Obviously, they have Zach Ertz, and I think Aguilar is one of the ones that's going to be available this week. But you can see a situation where Wentz wants to drop the ball down to um, Sanders. Lastly was Drake. Honestly, I probably will not have Kenyon Drake in my player pool just because Miami is a hot mess right now. They to the game script favors them and back up to in garbage time to get points, but it's just not happening for them. And I don't even know. I'm not sure where Drake is even priced at. Well, Balaj for Miami is at 4,100, so you would think that Drake would be above him. And he is, bear with me, Drake's at 4,500. Drake at 4,500, and you can go up to 4,700 and maybe target somebody like Mostert from San Francisco, or even, I mean, just go up a little bit more. For me, I'm not going to use him. He's viable. If this is the game that Miami wants to maybe try to play respectfully and have a little bit of pride, but I'm not personally going to use him. He's just one that is viable. In the first 2 weeks, the winning lineups have had at least one of the top 5 running backs with in the as far as touches. The winning lineups on the Millie Maker have had at least one of those running backs. I would like to get 2 of them. If you do get 2, you're going to have to spend down in other places and spending down a quarterback or receiver. But you definitely have to have one of the top 5 in touches. Now, the top 5 in touches doesn't necessarily mean, let's see, Barkley, Elliott, McCaffrey, Kamara, and Cook. Kamara's not getting a lot of rushes, so I don't even have Kamara in my player pool this week. So I would Barkley, Elliott, McCaffrey, Cook, or Eckler. I'm going to have one of those in my lineup. I definitely have to have one of those. And if I could get to two, that'd be really good. And my strategy, as I mentioned in the very beginning, is I want to utilize three running backs. I want to put one in the flex if I can. So the running backs, as I mentioned, seem to be the most consistent. They're reliable week to week, and looking at touches, you can get a good feel for what the offenses are doing. Focus on the touches and the percentage of the offense that the running backs have. Game game script and the higher totals. Look at those, and home favorites. Home favorites is just one of the things that especially teams that are higher favorites. Now, New England is a huge favorite at home, playing the Jets. Similar situation last week, but they were on the road. They were a huge favorite, and I thought Sony Michel was a lock to score a lot of points. Well, Sony Michel doesn't catch any passes. That belongs to James White. He had a mediocre game, but not what he didn't get value for what his salary was. So games like that, you just have to. I mean, just have to consider the source. Belichick, Patriots are never really reliable as far as pinpointing what they're going to do, except on defense. They're going to try to eliminate your best player. So what I want to say now is, we have the player pool that we're going to use. Again, McCaffrey, Barkley, Elliott, Mack, Cook, Eckler, Gore, Lindsey, Sanders, and Drake. And when we do our recaps show, the strategy show, we'll be using those quarterbacks to build, or running backs to build lineups. I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for the time. And I'd like to ask you if you'd subscribe, hit the like button, drop some comments below if there's something that I can do better, something that you didn't like. Can't really tell me if you got value from this until after the games play on Sunday. But I will be coming back with the wide receiver video. And like I said, if you'd hit the subscribe button, like button, and the notification bell, so when I do post these videos, you'll be notified when they're posted. I appreciate your time again. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you real soon.